So Bad Mums was pretty stop-start, but overall it was quite fun. Hiya, I'm ThatJaymsWisdom, and this is a review of Bad Moms, or Bad Mums as we would call it in the UK, and it's a comedy film about mothers trying to deal with the pressures of looking after their children, going to PTA meetings, having jobs, and also having their own lives around that as well. And on top of all of that, they're dealing with a posh mum who is the head of the PTA and is overbearing in the way that she wants everybody else to raise their children, and it's just causing them loads and loads of stress, so they decide to be bad mums. Our main protagonist is an average mum named Amy, played by Mila Kunis, who is underappreciated by her husband, her boss at work, her 2 kids, and is constantly under pressure to perform in the way that everybody expects her to, until she sort of reaches a breaking point where she decides, no, I can't be doing with PTA meetings and working an extra 2 days a week when I'm not being paid to, doing all my kids' homework for them, making them ridiculous lunches, having my husband not appreciate me and not do any work around the house. So she decides to stop trying to be the perfect mum and instead just to be a bad mum. And in doing so, she meets up with 2 other mums who are just as under pressure as her, but are quite different from her. These are Carla, played by Kathryn Hahn, who is a sexually aggressive single mum, and Kiki, played by Kristen Bell, who is the stay-at-home mum that's submissive and under pressure from her husband. And it's these 3 very different characters that work so well in the film. They're all very different types of mother with different ages of children and different personality types that are all very clearly from different backgrounds. But they're all under the same pressures from school and home life and all of that kind of stuff. So they all have something in common, yet are very, very different women. And that leads to some really, really good character dynamics that leads again to lots of very, very funny dialogue and moments of humour. And whilst this film is very funny in certain parts, it's not perfect all the way through. I would say that it's very stop-start in the way that the story develops. It's quite slow to get started with the setup and background of Amy's character, where we learn who she is and what she's about and her environment and her situation. And at that point it's not very funny at all before it kind of launches itself into some very, very funny sequences a little later on, which are done incredibly well. But then it goes back to that same kind of slow, not very funny thing, and then goes back into comedy again, and it keeps going in and out of that all the way up until the final act, which is much more kind of heartfelt than it is comedy. And overall I think that's what I would say about this film. The big thing about this film is that it is very funny when those characters are together, and in certain sequences and in certain scenes there is really, really great comedy, but it's all tied together by stuff that's quite slow and not all that interesting, and it leads to a film that does kind of feel like it's stopping and starting throughout. Once you get about halfway through the film, you kind of realise what you're in for, and I found that I was able to sort of ignore it at that point and just get on with the film and enjoy it for what it was. But going in, it did feel like it was a bit slow, and I thought, oh, this doesn't look like it's going to be very funny. Then it picked up, and then it tailed off again, and then it picked up again. One of the things in this film I thought was really, really well done was a bunch of the slow motion sequences. There are a number of slow motion sequences through this film where the women are going crazy or getting drunk or having a party, or those kinds of things where they're cutting loose a little bit. And those tend to be done in slow motion and be very, very well done visual comedy, almost slapstick in some instances. And whilst there is a lot of slow motion and it does become very obvious when things are going to happen in this way, they work really, really well. They're incredibly well shot. There's lots of really good, amusing things going on in all of these sequences. And I would say that they are one of the funniest parts of the film, when nobody is saying anything and there's just this visual comedy going on where these women are going mad or cutting loose or whatever you want to call it. And I think whilst this film is a little slow at moments and can be a bit hit and miss, the physical comedy on it really does raise it to another level that improves the film and makes it much more enjoyable to watch throughout. I think really that's my review of this film. It can be a bit hit and miss and it's quite slow at points, but there is some very, very good comedy in there, and the actors in this film are very, very good, and the characters work well together to give you a really good dynamic for the comedy to use. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I've been That James Wisdom. Keep smiling, and thank you very kindly. I hope you enjoyed this review of Bad Mums. If you did, please like and subscribe and go and watch last week's video. And also follow me on Twitter, where you can see all of my reviews. This was my 63rd film this year, so there's a lot up there for you to check out.